Welcome to Taming Disaster with Drones for Good podcast, presented by Aeros, part of GE Aviation, with additional financial support from First Eyes and Pix4D. Tune in for in-depth interviews, one-of-a-kind perspectives, and insightful conversations with industry leaders who are using drones to help prepare for, respond to, and recover from complex emergencies and major disasters around the world. And now, from the Airt Studios in Miami, Florida, the heart of Hurricane Alley, here is your host, Christopher Todd.
Welcome to another edition of Taming Disaster Drones for Good. It's great to have you with us. We have a very special program today. As you may probably know, last week was National Drone Safety Awareness Week here in the United States. And joining us today is Mike O'Shea, Program Manager for the UAS Integration Office with the Federal Aviation Administration. Mike, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And also Charles Werner, Director of the Drone Responders Program. Charles, welcome back.
Hey, good morning.
So it's great to have each of you with us here today, and we've got some really important topics that we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about National Drone Safety Awareness Week, get a recap from the perspective of Mike and the FAA and how they think things went. Charles, I'm going to want your input on that as well. I want to talk about COVID-19 and specifically what it means for Part 107 pilots who are either looking to certify for the first time or who are now up on their renewal, because I think we need to get some information out to the general public on that, on what that means. And I want to talk about the Integration Pilot Project, the IPP, and what that means with the transition over to Beyond and the impact for public safety. We're going to talk about remote ID. I know, Mike, you can't talk too much about it because it's in the rulemaking process, but we're going to try to see what we can get out of you on that and what insights we can glean. We'll dip into the Beyond Visual Line of Sight tactical waiver that came out recently, an update on that, and talking a little bit about new initiatives for 2021. But let's start right at the top. Mike, I want to hear a little bit about you. Typically, I ask all of our guests, how you got into aviation. I know you were also involved with public safety before that. So can you fill us a little bit about your background and how you got to this point?
So I don't think I've ever actually been asked how I got into aviation. So that's kind of an interesting question. But I grew up as an Air Force brat. My dad came to this country and joined the military to get his American citizenship from Ireland. And so I grew up around airplanes, living on Air Force bases all around the world. When I was a kid, I was in Civil Air Patrol, and that's when I first started flying in small aircraft. And then when I spent almost 15 years as a uniformed law enforcement officer, and some of that time was flying and acting as an observer too. And then I got my pilot's license, and I went to work for not at the same time, but went to work for the U.S. Department of Justice from law enforcement. I spent 17 years there at the Office of Science and Technology as a senior law enforcement program manager. And one of the programs I ran was the Aviation Technology Program. And essentially what that was designed to do was to sort of look at aviation technologies that could support the majority of public safety that can't afford, standard aviation technology like helicopters and big fixed-wing aircraft. And we looked at everything from, powered parachutes to gyroplanes to light sport aircraft and to unmanned aircraft systems. And initially, unmanned aircraft systems, and we would bring stakeholders together of public safety and have them sort of rank what was most interesting to them in terms of what they would utilize the most and was most cost effective and that kind of stuff. And unmanned aircraft systems, it was funny. It started off at the bottom of the list back in 2003. And then by the time I left DOJ in 2018 and came over to the the Federal Aviation Administration, it was at the top of the list. I mean, it had gone from being something that was really expensive, didn't fly very well, didn't have the cameras were basically like looking through a straw, and they weren't very strong, and they just weren't that great, to now where you have very low cost systems that can really do a good job of supporting public safety. I've been with the FAA now for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years next year. My job is primarily to work with public safety agencies and getting their programs going, working with them on issues concerning public safety and the integration of unmanned aircraft systems, and sort of being a resource for public safety. I like to tell people that I work for everybody. Everybody is my boss. The public safety agencies, people in the FAA, people in other parts of the government, even you, Chris, and Charles are my boss. I work for everybody. I'm in that unique position where I get to work for everybody and help everybody.
Well, and I think it's really important. And I just want to reemphasize the fact that, it's pretty unique that your background was with Department of Justice, was in public safety before you went to the FAA. Because I think a lot of times people in the industry or in the public safety sector are dealing with somebody in government, somebody at the FAA, and they will automatically just think, oh, it's somebody it's a Washington, D.C. person with no experience in what I'm doing. And you have that experience. You were out. You understand public safety, you understand law enforcement, and that's super important because you can make that transition for these systems for those agencies.
And I really love this job. I love supporting public safety. I love doing it when I was at DOJ. I love doing it here. I always tell people I have the best job in the world, because I get to help people, and I get to help people that help people, which is even a greater job. So I really enjoy doing this.
And Charles, I want to go over to you because there's a lot of parallels I know your background was not necessarily as aviation centric as Mike's was, but you came out of fire rescue emergency management and got into unmanned systems. Can you just give us a brief recap there? Because I think the two of you really are a dynamic perspective from both the law enforcement side and the fire rescue side.
Well, I think we're similar in the fact that we were both involved in technology. And technology was a big force multiplier of what we do in public safety. So that I had started exploring drones back in 2014, and I was kind of like Mike. I'd gotten a Parrot Bebop drone, and it was controlled by the phone, and it just wasn't there yet, in my opinion, as far as what we could do for public safety. And I kind of transitioned and experimented with the Phantom 3 Advanced, and started seeing the gimbal, the stabilization, the high definition video, similar to what Mike was saying. Is now we were starting to see the functionality, the ease of operation, the cost factors. So it was kind of a next step for me to move from the technology of communications, interoperability, GIS, broadband. But the interesting thing about it was all those things have converged. So you've got broadband connectivity that goes into the streaming of the video from the drone, and you've got GIS integrating with the imagery. So I kind of fell into a place where all of it kind of came together to make even better sense of what we could get out of the drones.
And can you briefly, I think a lot of people out there are familiar with drone responders, but just briefly kind of quick recap for those who may not be, describe what the mission of drone responders is and how you work with the FAA and other groups?
Well, I think, again, that's similar to what Mike said. We kind of work with everybody. Our goal is to capture information and share it and create collaborations between people. And it's because of that we've been able to communicate with a number of different departments around the country and work on a collective project with the FAA, like the Tactical Beyond Visual Line of Sight Waiver, where we were able to go back and forth. And I think it was interesting. I mean, having Mike at the FAA was really important because he had that public safety insight of our operations. But it was really an evolution and a growing process that we had to find that sweet spot of trust. The FAA is all about safety in the national airspace, and we're more involved with risks. So we can do things under certain risks that may not be acceptable to the FAA. So we had to learn back and forth what was the right place that we could do both, and that's been the exciting part. But we provide a resource center with over 400 documents so that SOPs, training manuals, policy manuals, all that kind of information is out there shared from other departments, where before, as Mike can remember, when we started this, there wasn't anything. There were no SOPs, and everybody was starting from scratch. And it was in the regulations. When the regulations changed in 2016, we kind of catapulted forward very quickly because now it became much easier to operate.
And I really want to reemphasize your point on the relationship that you've been able to build and establish with Mike and the FAA between drone responders, because it is so important, not only in this sector, but in anything, to have the right relationships and to build that trust. And you two have done just a wonderful job at doing that. And it's been really fascinating and enjoyable to see. So shifting gears, talking about building relationships, one of the big challenges that we continue to see bubble to the top from public safety agencies as well as the commercial sector is the need to foster positive community perception surrounding drones and the use of drones, not only for good, but for commerce, for public safety. And last year, 2019 was the first year that the FAA introduced National Drone Safety Awareness Week. Mike, can you kind of walk us through what the catalyst for that was and why the FAA decided to do that?
Yeah, we were looking at a way that we could sort of reach out to the public and let them know that, this device that you're buying is not a toy. It's got to be treated as an aircraft and operated safely in the national airspace. We wanted to do that in a way that sort of was a positive way to reach out and let people know what's going on with UAS and let them know how they could operate them safely and sort of let them get involved in the process, make them stakeholders to what we're doing. So last year was the first year we did it, and this year, the second year we did it, and it's a little different because of the COVID, that most of the events are obviously virtual instead of in person. So the goal essentially was to use the digital platforms that we have at the FAA and do email marketing, public affairs outreach, promote the event for virtual participation, and share information during the week-long event with the aviation community, media, Congress, and obviously the public that we serve. The summary of the events is, we've had this event. This is our second year doing it. And the messaging strategy was essentially, every day would be sort of a different event that would look at sort of a different stakeholder in the operating of UAS. So last Thursday during Drone Week was the public safety day that we were looking to make sure that people knew that the FAA there and organizations like Charles and Drone Responder were there to assist and help public safety agencies with starting their drone programs, answering their questions about how they should operate, working with them through the COA process, the 107 process, and whatever it takes. But the themes we had last week was Monday, we talked about what do you need to know before you actually fly a UAS or a drone. Tuesday was how do you improve your flying skills, which is also the theme of an article I wrote that'll be coming out in our Flight Safety magazine in January. Wednesday was the passion to profession, how you can take that, your hobby of operating a drone and make a business out of it. Thursday, like I said, was starting a public safety program. Friday's talking about STEM programs in the classroom. And then Saturday and Sunday is talking about having fun and why we fly. And it's when we did the first year, it was really, really successful. There was a really good buy-in for the community. Last week was amazing too. We heard from people all across the country that sent us pictures of what they did, how they're operating their aircraft, what they're doing to practice operating their aircraft and improve their flying skills. And we worked with a lot of public safety agencies on both starting their program and answering their questions about their programs.
Yeah, I think it's been really great to see the enthusiasm from the commercial drone sector, even the public safety sector, getting behind National Drone Safety Awareness Week. It's. I think when it first came out, people were excited, and I was worried that COVID might, dampen that like it's dampened everything, but it hasn't. From what I saw last week, just a ton of events, virtual events, a few live events. Charles, I mean, in your mind, what does National Drone Safety Awareness Week mean for public safety agencies? Is it beneficial? And what are some of the things you look at as far as what agencies could be doing to partake in year 3 moving forward?
Well, I think first of all, it gets us all in a mindset of safety. That's the most important message, I think, out of the week. But for public safety, I think it's twofold. One, it gives an opportunity for departments across the country to share how they're using drones for good. It also gives a chance to actually share information between departments. So when they see some of these things that the other departments are doing, which we've seen through our study, has had the biggest impact on other departments expanding their operations because they're learning from what other agencies are doing. We found in our spring study that there were over 17 public safety use cases identified now. And I can remember back 3 or 4 years ago that there might have been 3. So we were talking about damage assessment, traffic crash reconstruction, and searching for lost people. And that was kind of the 3 that you saw standard. So I think that's the biggest impact from this week.
Gotcha. And for those of you listening, if you want a recap on some of the amazing things that happened during National Drone Safety Awareness Week, you can check your favorite social media channel. The hashtag was Drone Week, #Drone Week. I know the FAA communications team was doing a good job at retweeting and publicizing the different events taking place. So that should be archived out there. Go take a look and dip into National Drone Safety Awareness Week and learn how different organizations around the United States and the American airspace system have been using drones for good and for a wide variety of missions. Okay, I think we really need to get in. I know COVID-19 is just so, we're all kind of wanting to be over this, but we're not, unfortunately. And it is impacting certain operations. And most notably, there's been a little bit of questions regarding how do I become either certified for the first time as a Part 107 pilot or, like myself, up for recertification. What do I need to do? And I know that there was a temporary process in place where you would take an online exam and basically extend your recertification window. Mike, do you have any information on kind of where that stands today and what the process is as we head into December and start looking towards 2021?
So a couple different things have happened. As you mentioned, that we actually did have a process where we extended expiration dates on Part 107 license and registrations. And that information was provided at www.faa.gov/UAS. And part of the reason we had to do that is because basically most states sort of shut down, that including shut down small businesses. And that's because they didn't have procedures in place that actually could clean the surfaces of the buildings and that kind of stuff, but decontaminate the offices. And I think now some of those processes are in place and more of those businesses are open. As COVID gets sort of worse again now in the fall, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of whether more businesses will close, including the testing centers. And if that happens, whether or not we'll have to go and extend expiration dates again. But at this point, that hasn't happened. But I recommend you follow that webpage I mentioned, FAA.gov/UAS, and it'll have any information about whether we're going to do that or not on that page. And the way to contact the FAA if you have concerns or you need answers to questions is you can reach us by sending an email to uashelp@faa.gov, or you can call 844-FLY-MY-UA, FLYMYUA.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it's while the testing, recertification, and certification is obviously controlled through the FAA and your testing center partners, the operation of those testing centers is by and large determined by the states and the jurisdictions which they operate. And if they're in a hot zone, they may be closed for safety reasons, either that they determine or by order of local government. So there's not a one-size-fits-all solution right now. So it is a little bit hairy. So for folks who need clarification, is there a number or an email address that they might be able to use to get more information, or you just suggest they go to the website?
Now, they can actually go to the Drone Zone and actually send them an email or call them at FlyMy. I can't remember the numbers. FlyMyUA 866 FlyMyUA. I can't remember what the number is off the top of my head, but there's an email address and a telephone number you can call that gets our UAS support center, and you can ask that question there. If you're impacted because your testing site is closed and your license is going to expire, you should probably let us know.
Okay, so that is great information for all of you Part 107 pilots out there or pending Part 107 pilots. The FAA is working on getting you the information you need to make sure that you are good to go when operating drones. And I think that's the key takeaway here is that, there's no definitive guidance on that right now because COVID is just kind of flipping everything around. And so it's going to be, in some cases, potentially a case-by-case basis. Charles, we're seeing a lot of public safety agencies operate with Part 107 as the starting point. And I think we both agree that's a really, really great strategy to take place. What impact do you see this having on public safety as far as getting these renewals going? Is there a threat that some public safety operations may need to cease operations until they can get this sorted out?
So there's a combination of factors. It depends on, are they Part 107, are they COA, or are they both? Because in some cases, they may be able to fly under the COA if the Part 107s have expired under their own COA through the self-certification process. But yeah, I think there's always a danger that there may be, especially for a lot of agencies, and a lot of law enforcement agencies do Part 107 only currently. So if they do expire, they will have to abide by that fact that they're no longer certified pilots until there's some other type of remediation.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things too that it's not like you're getting a calendar reminder to that your Part 107 is up for renewal. So everyone listening, if you're Part 107, go in and check your last recertification date and make sure you know when it expired. You may be expired now. You may need to take action immediately, but at least know when it's coming up, especially for those of you who were in that first wave back in 2016. You're impacted. And along those lines, we also saw that the drone registrations for that first wave, the 3-year renewal is now coming up. And my understanding is that December is going to be the time when everyone needs to go in and start taking a look at possibly renewing some aircraft. Any updates on that, Mike?
We did send an email out for recreational users. I think it was 466,000 emails to remind them they need to renew, but I don't know about what else has been done besides that.
Okay, so I mean, it's probably just a good rule of thumb as you're managing your UAS program to make sure that you're tracking when your remote pilots are coming up for renewal and when your aircraft are coming up for re-registration, and at least do an annual audit on that. And so you've been warned, and you know where to go. And if you have questions, Mike lets you know where to go get more information. All right, let's talk about the Integration Pilot Program, the IPP. Really fascinating to see the use cases that were deployed over the last couple of years. And now we're moving into this new program called Beyond. Mike, what's the FAA's thought on the IPP? Was it a success? And what should we be looking for with Beyond as we transition over?
Yeah, I think we found the IPP program to be a great success. It sort of pushed the boundaries of what we had allowed operations. And the goal was to have local government working with industry to basically develop complex UAS operations to support whatever their mission, whether it's inspecting power lines, delivering packages or medical supplies, whatever their concern was. The goal was to work this through. And some of the successful things for public safety were the drone as a first responder program that came out of the San Diego IPP with the Chula Vista Police Department that essentially allowed them to launch a drone from the top of their police building, go out to approximately 3 miles, and respond to 911 calls where there was a threat to either people on the ground, depending on the type of call, domestic violence, whatever, or there could be a threat to their officers. So it was sort of a life-saving type event and allowed them to get that situational awareness overhead prior to the officers actually arriving at the scene. And it came in, they had some really great success stories using that program. From spotting where the bad guy was hiding, making sure the guy who looked like he might have a gun and it turned out to be a lighter. It was a lot of good things that came out by using that drone as a first responder. So that started in 2017, and we had those programs running for a while. It's now by law the program sunsetted in October. And so it migrated we wanted to keep these programs going and expand what we're doing and sort of push some of the concepts that we're working on at the FAA. And so we created a new program called Beyond. And Beyond is looking at to tackle what we call the remaining challenges of UAS integration. And the challenges include beyond visual line of sight operations that are repeatable, scalable, economically viable, with specific emphasis on infrastructure inspection, public operations, and small package delivery. Also, we're looking at beyond visual line of sight operations that are repeatable, scalable, economically viable, with specific emphasis on infrastructure inspection, public operations, and small package delivery. We're also leveraging industry operations to better analyze and quantify the societal and economic benefits of UAS operations, and we're focusing on community engagement to collect, analyze, and address community concerns regarding the use of unmanned aircraft systems.
So, Mike, this is Charles. Let me ask a question. So Beyond is still for those entities that made up the IPP, with the exception there's one that's dropped out, I believe.
So there were 10 initially. One dropped out because the people that submitted the application had moved on. But so it will include those people. But the question that we're looking at right now is if there are new complex operations that make sense to fit under Beyond, whether or not we would include them as programs as well.
Yeah, that was my question was, is there a way that we could have actually a larger public safety conversation that we could work on projects under Beyond as opposed to having to go through one of those entities that have been working?
I actually think that's a great idea, and I would be happy to sit down with you and the head of Beyond to discuss that.
Because what we'd like to do is to learn from those departments that are doing things, trying things, as well as, we've had some of the drone as first responder expand out where they're using within visual line of sight to accomplish that, and being able to explore where Chula Vista left off and where do we go next, because I think San Diego may not be going forward as far as the Beyond.
Well, see, now that's what I love. Every time I get you two in a room, new things happen. It's like magic starts bubbling up through the hat and a rabbit comes out. So if I'm hearing this correctly, there may be opportunities for public safety agencies to get involved in Beyond as we're moving forward. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Well, I think that's what Mike said we could talk about to see. He'll go back and talk with Beyond folks to see if there's a way that we might be able to create kind of a collaborative environment where we could have things centralized, maybe through drone responders, so people could say, here's some of the things we're doing, so that we don't have the FAA being hit by 40 different requests. And then we could prioritize the projects that we work on, and we work with the FAA to try to figure out how to make them come to life.
Awesome. So stay tuned for more information on that. We'll see where that one goes. Charles, looking back in the rearview mirror for the IPP, obviously, to Mike's point, San Diego and drone as a first responder was, I think, the highlight that everyone heard about. What's your perspective from the public safety side on did the IPP deliver what it was supposed to, and where would you like to see this go forward?
Well, I think it did in a limited fashion. I think it did for the drone as a first responder program, and that was also kind of working through the IPP was also a part of the collaborative effort toward the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver. So those things kind of played into that, because Chula Vista it was one of the first that got the beyond visual line of sight waiver for operations, and so it was a collaboration between the agencies. I think that the Beyond and talking about this next level of collaboration might be where we can take it a little bit further. And as I mentioned, we do have some other departments that are doing the drone as a first responder program within visual line of sight right now, not going to the BVLOS direction. So it might be some more exploration that we can do. And
I will tell you that what got me excited about tactical beyond visual line of sight was actually listening to Charles present at an IPP meeting in DC and talking about the need for it. And that's sort of what got me excited about working on that issue.
Yeah, that's something a lot of folks just don't understand. They think of beyond visual line of sight as these long linear operations, pipeline inspections, power line transmission, railroad, and they don't realize that for a public safety agency, beyond visual line of sight could just mean flying around the backside of a house for a structure fire to look in the window, or to be able to fly and look in the window for a barricaded suspect who might have a hostage without putting the pilot in harm's way of that line of sight. So completely different type of operation, but technically by rule still beyond visual line of sight. So I think it was great to see that kind of come out. So let's talk about the tactical waiver a little bit. That was one of, I think, the highlights that came out of 2020 as we look back in the rearview mirror. Mike, can you talk a little bit more about kind of what the internal process was within the FAA to make that happen?
Sure. So we had the initial agency, as most people know, was York County, Virginia. Went through a long process back, I think it was early last year, to basically get the first sort of tactical beyond visual line of sight. And it was sort of limited in operations. It made a lot of people nervous because, the second you lose sight of that drone, you don't know what's happening with it. And so what they did, they actually were flying the drone, and then they had another drone watching the drone so that they could see where the drone was at. But that wasn't really practical for, and sustainable for future operations. So then we had two agencies that applied for what I would call the modern version of tactical beyond visual line of sight. And that was Pearland, Texas, and Chula Vista Police Department. And because of that, our air traffic organization, who anytime that there's a waiver to 91.113, which is you must be able to see and avoid other aircraft, or in this case, sense and avoid other aircraft, they have to have a waiver team come together and basically make a safety mitigation case to allow that type of operation or deny that operation based on safety concerns. So they allowed those two operations, and they realized that if a lot of public safety agencies came to them, it would basically swamp them in terms of, having to bring these people together. And so they sat down and they said, the air traffic organization sat down and said, what would it take for us to sort of allow these as a standing process? And so they evaluated what they thought worked, what they felt was safe, the risk of that operation compared to the fact that they may be saving human lives. And so we sat down with them and sort of drew up a guidance document and basically said, if you come back to us and you parrot what we've said here and basically say, you're going to tell us you're going to follow these things. You're always going to try to stay within 50 feet of a structure. You're not going to fly above a hard ceiling of 400 feet or above the hard ceiling of a facility map altitude value. You're only going to go out 1,500 feet. And the second you're in a position where you don't need to be beyond visual line of sight, you come back into visual line of sight operations. So it's not designed to be sort of something you operate 24/7, beyond visual line of sight. It's for those life-saving operations where you need to be on the other side of the building to look in that window. You need to see where the fire hotspots are on the other side of the building without having to move your operation. You need to see if there's a deputy eating pit bull in that backyard before you send in your SWAT team. And that's what it was really designed for. And I think it's worked really well for the agencies that are using it. It has a couple of unique things that you can do with the tactical beyond visual line of sight. You can operate in any facility map grid value altitude using that as your hard ceiling without further coordination with the FAA, even if it's in a red gridded area. In other words, if you look at a Lance facility map, it's either green or red, and green means that you can do it off of your iPhone or smartphone, but red means it has to have further coordination with the FAA. Well, with tactical beyond visual line of sight, if you need to operate in there, you can do so as long as you stay below that facility map altitude value, and without any further coordination with the FAA, because we consider this a life-saving operation. And then, of course, everybody hopefully knows that if you need to exceed those values, you need to go higher than 400 feet or higher than the facility map altitude values. You need to go farther than 1,500 feet. Then you call our Systems Operations Support Center or request an SGI or Special Governmental Interest. And if you haven't worked with our Systems Operations Support Center, they're phenomenal. They will bend over backwards. They want public safety to accomplish their missions. And if they tell you no, there's a specific reason why they told you no, not because they don't love you. It's because there's either another operation going on there, or there's a federal operation going on, or the president's plane is moving through the area. But they try to ensure that if you have a emergency operation that's time sensitive, they're going to work hard to allow you to fly.
I was going to say the SOSG's really got their pulse on everything that's happening within the national airspace system, from what I understand.
Right.
Yeah. So and they've done a really good job at getting these requests approved when they can be approved in a quick manner. But with public safety, as you both know, time is of the essence in so many cases. So Charles, over to you. What has been the impact of this waiver? How important is it for a public safety agency really to have a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver if they're conducting regular UAS operations?
Well, first, let me say that this was a huge breakthrough, I think, between public safety and the FAA. It really became an understanding of both sides of how do we get to that sweet spot. But from a tactical operation, it's a huge advantage. In fact, we have one example that I've actually sent to the FAA already about how it was used in a police operation where a father had a son held hostage, and they were able to fly and go tactical beyond visual line of sight and be able to visualize everything that was going on, which made the ability for them to mitigate without any further actions. So if you think about it, when you have an active shooter, when you have a hazmat situation, any of those situations where you can now fly in and around the buildings, basically with the 1,500 feet, it gives us the ability to fly around almost any large city block. So even if you're in a metropolitan city and you're flying around a block, you can see over the other side and around all the corners, which we couldn't do before without getting some other approvals. But I will say that I will wrap up with just saying that it's also our responsibility as public safety to make sure we use it correctly and that we don't exceed the boundaries that have been put forth so that we maintain that trust. And I'd also like to say that we as drone responders recognize the FAA for the work that they did and gave them a commendation for the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, because it does actually impact responder safety, as well as making us have better opportunities to do our jobs. And then we also recognize the SOSC for their continued support through the SGI process, because both of those things have been huge for public safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charles, you mentioned earlier just all the different use cases that we identified through the Air Drone Responders Survey of drones for public safety types of responses. And, Mike, you just brought up a really interesting point. Deputy looking for a man-eating pit bull who might try to eat the deputy. I mean, even for the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, the use cases are now emerging. I mean, the obvious ones, barricaded suspect, structure fire, but just that situational awareness. And I think we're going to, you can see here in Florida, we've had a lot of recent flooding with the tropical storms where cars have driven into canals unbeknownst. So just the different types of operations where you may need to fly beyond visual line of sight from a tactical perspective is going to continue to expand. So for an agency that wants to pursue this waiver, Mike, what is Drone Zone the starting point for that, or what do you recommend?
First, you have to have a public aircraft COA. That's kind of important. We've had people call and say, well, can I do this under 107? And the answer is at this time, no. And the reason why is because under a COA, it gives you the limited operations over people in case of an emergency. You don't get that under Part 107. There is a waiver to that, but it's not very easy to obtain because none of these aircraft that we're operating are certified. Whereas under a public aircraft operation COA, you're actually self-certifying your aircraft. So that's why we allow that operation. So you have to have that first. And then basically what you have to do is if you go to the webpage, and it's the FAA.gov/UAS, on the left-hand column it says Government and Public Safety. You click on that. And then it says Public Safety Toolkit. Click on that. And then it has a guidance paper that's a link on that page on how you apply for a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver. And what you initially have to do is you have to basically send us a concept of operation based off that guidance that we've given you and it gets emailed to our 91-113 waiver team, our beyond visual line of sight waiver team. And they review it and make sure that you understand the concept, you understand the operation, and how you're expected to operate under this rule. And what they do is they reach back to you and say, yep, you're good to go, or no, you need to make some corrections, or you're not even close. But for the most part, people are good to go, or they need some minor corrections. And then when they get the approval, they're asked to submit for a new COA. And the new COA will basically take the wording from their old COA and add this section on tactical beyond visual line of sight. And then that's reissued as a new COA. And that gives them that ability to use that in these type of situations.
And that's great info. And so that's FAA.gov/UAS. Charles, I know Drone Responders has also put out some guidance on that. Where can people go at droneresponders.org to learn about the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver?
They can go into the Resource Center and then go into the waivers section, and it has a template that we put together. We actually had conversations and had engagement with the FAA, Mike and Steve Pansky, during the FAA symposium. So we kind of took all that information, put it together into a template, and then we distributed that out to the membership and to other stakeholders. And to date, what I've heard from everybody is everybody that followed our template have successfully gotten their tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver.
All right. So that's droneresponders.org, the Resource Center. There's no cost to become a member at Drone Responders, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So another topic that's been getting a lot of interest lately that I know, the FAA has not been able to talk about as much as you'd probably like is remote ID. So Mike, to the extent you are able to discuss it, what can you tell us about where we're at with remote ID and what we might be looking towards over the next couple months?
So as you well know, the rule is in rulemaking, and it was expected to be out by the end of next month, by the end of December. The only thing that may slow that down is typically with an administration change, they want to evaluate all new rules that are coming out before they're released. And so that may delay it a month or so, but it's pretty much ready, is what I understand it is to be released. Just the timing will be, the next couple of months. The basics of the remote ID is we wanted to give, our public safety and national security partners the ability to identify drones that are flying overhead. Basically, if you can see it, you should be able to ID it. And then also, get the registration information via that drone and find out where the operators are at that drone. We were actually able to do a demonstration to the ASTM standard, not to the remote ID rule because it's not out yet, but to the ASTM standard. We actually did an evaluation, and Charles was at that evaluation, and we basically were able to demonstrate that we could fly a drone You could point your smartphone or whatever at that drone, and it would say, that's drone ABC123 that belongs to Mike O'Shea. And, it's a whatever type of drone. Oh, and by the way, Mike O'Shea is at 5th and Main. And while you're watching that drone, you can see where it flies on, a Google map or whatever. So you know whether or not it's violating airspace, whether it's flying over your house. And then we thought that was sort of important for public safety. I know when I fly my drone in my backyard, I typically just go straight up. But my neighbors 4 houses down are firmly in belief that I'm right over their backyard. So I think the ability for public safety to show up and say, no, that Mike O'Shea never left his backyard is pretty important because, we're not there yet, but eventually, coming from public safety, I know we're going to get a lot of nuance type calls, reference people operating drones, and we need to be able to say, yeah, they were doing something illegally, and we're able to record that information, or no, they're operating perfectly legal, and they can continue to conduct their operation.
And I just want to add to that, this smart device that you're talking about using your smartphone or whatever can detect these drones that you're flying without any connectivity. So even if you don't have the network connectivity with a carrier, you can still use your phone as a detection and location.
Yeah, what it's doing is just using either the Wi-Fi antenna or the Bluetooth antenna in here, the Bluetooth 4 or 5 antenna, and it's just using that to pick up. So you don't have to be connected to the internet. You don't have to be connected to a cellular connection. It's just using the antenna and the built-in app in your phone to get that information. And it works really well. We were really surprised how well it worked, how easy it was to use. And the manufacturers claim the distances that you can pick up a drone. Our basic minimum standard was if you could see it, you should be able to ID it. But they were saying that in an urban environment, you could go 2.5 miles under Bluetooth. And with a Wi-Fi, you go 5 miles plus picking up a drone. So we're pretty excited about this technology. And I think it's going to be a huge game changer for public safety and our national security partners.
Yeah, I think it will too. And that is a really important use case. I mean, there was an incident probably about 2-3 years ago here in Miami at a music festival where a photographer was flying a drone on the outer perimeter. He's actually out over water along the shoreline of the music festival, filming some imagery. And local police, I believe, stopped him, had him land the drone, and issued a citation or cited him for flying over the crowd. And he fought back. He basically went into court with his logs, his DJI logs, and was able to show from the flight logs that no, he was actually not over land, he was over water. But a tool like you're describing in the hands of law enforcement would alleviate those types of problems, because it is so difficult to your point about the neighbors. It's the point of view from somebody is, thinking the drone is over their house or over sensitive infrastructure is not always the case. So it's really important to have accurate information there. Charles, I mean, what do you see from the public safety side as far as how remote ID is going to impact public safety operations?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that as we're doing operations, we can actually look to detect other drones to determine if they're authorized or not authorized. We can tell friend from foe, or if we can't identify it, then we know it's not operating under the remote ID rules, and it gives us some avenues and the ability to locate the person for mitigation. So in these large-scale events or large incident where there is some kind of disruption, we can identify where the controller and the operator is, so we can actually take action more quickly.
Okay, so just quick recap on remote ID, possibly January 2021, depending on what happens with whatever administration is going to be in power at this point and what their appetite is to move forward on this. Fair to say? Okay. All right. Well, we've got just a few minutes left. So I want to quickly just touch on 2021. We're moving in, hopefully putting 2020 in the rearview mirror. It's been a hell of a year. I think we can all kind of agree on, and we're all looking for 2021 to hopefully be somewhat of a return to normalcy. What initiatives on the public safety side, other than remote ID, does the FAA have in their sights? Is there anything specific you're looking at for 2021, Mike?
Yeah, there's a couple things. Probably one of the more important things, and Charles can probably talk to this better than I can, but we partner with drone responders, the FAA has, to sort of work in a partnership and getting information out to our public safety stakeholders. And the cool thing about this is not only is us delivering information, from the government to public safety stakeholders, but for the public safety stakeholders to be able to feed back information to us to create that loop. Because part of what, we work in DC, I've always said, even when I was at DOJ, it's important for us to hear what people say out in the field. What are their concerns? What are their issues, to make sure that, one, we know about it, but two, in a lot of cases, there are issues that we've either resolved, we just don't know about because there's not that great loop between public safety and government. But to basically build that better relationship so that people, when they need answers, they're not afraid to reach out to the federal government and call and get answers. I used to always say, when I was a sheriff's deputy in Topeka, Kansas, if someone told me I had to call the FAA or the Department of Justice or Department of Homeland Security, like, who do I call? And on the other hand, and people sort of forget the government is actually people. So the people, when they do call, they think they're getting like this, this is the FAA, this is DHS, this is DOJ. And it's not, it's people. So it's important to sort of make that connection so they have somebody there. They're not afraid to reach out and ask, sometimes really mundane questions. Can I do this? Is this okay? Who do I call to get more information about this? And I get calls about stuff that have nothing to do with the FAA. Grants for buying drones for public safety. I probably answered thousands of questions reference that because I still have connections back with DOJ. And I sent people over to Charles to talk about FEMA grants and other stuff that from the fire side. But we're sort of there to be a resource, for the people out in the field. And I've never forgotten that it's people are always like, thank you for doing this for me. And I'm like, you pay me to do this. I work for you, and it's not the other way around. And I've never forgotten that. And so I'm always willing to, if I don't know the answer, I'm certainly happy to send you off to somebody who does.
Well, again, it's so important to have people who are willing to kind of do that, because you're right. I think a lot of people are intimidated by 3-letter federal agencies, thinking like, oh, they're, it's going to be impossible for me to get my answer back. And I've heard story after story of people who've, hey, we contacted the FAA. They're really helpful. And we saw that in the research we conducted about the favorable opinion in public safety specifically is improving, increasing from survey to survey over how responsive you are to the needs of public safety, you being the FAA. So congratulations on that once again. Charles, looking ahead to 2021, it sounds like what Mike's talking about is better communication, improving the flow of information, so everyone can get on the same page and understand where we're at. What does Drone Responders have up its sleeve at this point?
Well, actually, to drive us into 2021 in December, on December 9th, Drone Responders will be hosting the first of a series of webinars, webinar meetings, informational sharing, whatever you want to call it. But it'll be a conversation on public safety UAS with the FAA. And we'll have an hour and 15-minute session the second Wednesday of every month that we'll try to have an agenda in advance, and we will bring new information. The other thing that's really exciting is we get a chance to bring in other departments within the FAA. And so Mike's going to help coordinate that so we can learn who the different players are and what roles they play and what we're trying to accomplish and create new relationships. As Mike mentioned, it's really all about people. And the more that we have that connectivity between people and we can learn, so as the remote ID information comes out, this will be a place where we can dig into it and actually share information, take questions from people. And while we might not be able to answer all the questions in an hour and 15-minute session, we will get that information that we can then share and follow up with on that following month. So this is an exciting new process that we're going to have each month, second Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And we did it later in the day so that it made it more convenient for most locations around the country to do it not too early, not too late. But it's exciting because we're going to be able to talk about all these things. And tied to that, if we can have this discussion about beyond and what we do next, maybe that's the way that we collaborate with the people and share information that's coming out and be able to take in information of collaborative efforts.
Okay, so just to reemphasize, that's going to be Wednesday, December 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern?
4 p.m.
4 p.m. Wednesday, December 9th. And town hall meeting, webinar, Zoom meeting. What's the format for this?
It'll be a Zoom meeting to be provided by Drone Responders. We'll have it so that it'll be recorded and available after the meeting. So those that can't attend the meeting at that time can also come back and listen to it later. And my understanding is registration for that is open now at droneresponders.org/events. Go in, register, get yourself set up for the first, what's it called? It's a Drone Responders FAA
town hall meeting, or what's the title?
Well, that's the essence of it, but it's basically a conversation on public safety UAS with the FAA.
Okay. And Mike, you're going to be there. Are you bringing the whole gang, or who should we expect?
Yeah, the first time it'll just be me, but in the future sessions, what I'll do is I'll bring a guest to come with me. So I'll sort of help, and that way I can sort of draw them out too, and having my FAA insider knowledge, whatever that means. But no, the idea is to try to bring as many people in that are doing stuff for public safety, so they sort of know the players and so they sort of know the background of why they're doing things. So we'll have people from the Systems Operations Support Center. We'll have people from the Air Traffic Organization that are doing the COAs. We'll have people from the 91113 waiver team. We'll have people from the flight standards that are doing waiver reviews and that kind of stuff. And then I would like to bring in somebody from beyond now, because I didn't know that. I'm kind of excited by your idea, Charles, about looking at beyond as a way to focus specifically on a section of that on public safety. So I think it's a really good idea.
Well, it sounds like this is going to be a great new initiative and a great end of 2020 as we head into 2021. A conversation with the FAA hosted by drone responders Wednesday, December 9th, 4 p.m. Visit droneresponders.org/events and register now. Get yourself on that list. Gentlemen, we've got about a minute left here. Any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with as we head on out into the horizon? Mike?
No, I just hope everybody has a safe and happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully we have a safe and happy holidays at the end of the year as well. And if you're out flying drones, be careful. Be safe, and we're here to support you when you need it.
Charles?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Mike said, but I'd like to really make a note of the appreciation of what drone responders and public safety has for the efforts made by the FAA this past year. It's been a remarkable year of accomplishments, and next year is going to be even better.
All right. And on that note, I would like to thank both of you for joining us this week on Taming Disaster Drones for Good. Michael O'Shea, Program Manager with the UAS Integration Office at the Federal Aviation Administration. Charles Werner, Director of the Drone Responders Program. Thank you both. We'll see you next time on Taming Disaster Drones for Good.
Thank you for listening to Taming Disaster, a production of AIRT, the world's leading nonprofit organization supporting drones for good. Learn more about us online at airt.ngo. And be sure to tune in to our public safety focused podcast, Drone Responders, hosted by Charles Werner.